Welcome back to the Crash Course podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined not only by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott, but some new additions to the 3C Media family, and they're going to introduce themselves right now as we've got a new YouTube exclusive podcast that we are going to introduce to you guys after the week after the Super Bowl, so really excited to get into that.
My name's Michael. I'm a part of the MCT podcast that will be airing here on YouTube. Just kind of trying to keep it kind of simple and pretty laid back. I'm talking about a variety of things sports-wise. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, as you said, Chris, also part of that middle part of that MCT podcast. Super excited to get into that. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while, especially with my good buddy Craig Crash over there in one of those windows on your screen. So super excited for it.
And hi, everybody. My name is Tade. I'm the sports gambler of the group, so you know what I'll be talking about.
Problem child.
So basically, you're the B. Scott of the MCT podcast, because B. Scott is our resident gambler on our show. So
I was going to say, let's just say there's a reason his name comes last.
You're not wrong.
But yeah, super excited to have you guys, joining the 3C Media group. Of course, like I said, the week after the Super Bowl, that's when their podcast is going to be airing. It's going to be on Saturdays. So that will be really cool to get into. So excited to get some new YouTube exclusive content. We've been talking about having that for a long time. And so now to see some of that come to fruition, glad to have you guys aboard.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Like I said, this is I'm excited. Honored. This is going to be super fun. Really looking forward to getting into it.
Well, this is our Super Bowl special. That's why we wanted to bring everybody in so we can talk a little bit more about the Kansas City Chiefs and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, like B. Scott and I said last week, if you thought it was going to be anything other than the opposite of what we picked for championship weekend, that's on you guys, because obviously it was going to go the complete opposite direction. So let's go ahead and dive into it here. Super Bowl 55. First on one hand, we've got the Kansas City Chiefs. They're the 14-2 AFC West champions. The regular season, they started 4-0 before losing in Week 5 to the Raiders, but that launched a 10-game win streak, which did include a 27-24 win over the Buccaneers in Week 12. They did lose in Week 17 to the Chargers, but they basically had their third string in, so that doesn't really look too bad on them. As far as the postseason is concerned, they won 22-17 over the Browns back in the divisional round. And then, of course, in the AFC Championship game, they beat Buffalo 38-24 to get to this point. Looking at some stats, Pat Mahomes in the playoffs, I didn't realize this, he's completed 74% of his passes, which is pretty insane. The dude is on another level. 580 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He continues his streak of not throwing interceptions in the postseason outside of the Super Bowl, which is nuts. And then he's also got a rushing touchdown. Travis Kelce's been big as well, 21 receptions, 227 yards, and 3 touchdowns. As far as their offense is concerned, they're first in yards per game with 416. They're sixth in points per game with 30 points a game. They're first in passing, 303 yards, 16th in rushing with 112 yards per game. And then as far as their defense is concerned, they're 16th in yards allowed per game and 11th in points allowed per game, with allowing 23. 14th against the pass, 21st against the run. Honestly, in my opinion, this Kansas City team is a little bit better even than their team they had last year.
I mean, the big thing with that Kansas City team is just how much faith Andy Reid has in their players. I mean, we saw a team in Green Bay, sorry, Chris, that didn't even want to try on 4th and goal with Aaron Rodgers. But screw it, man. We got Chad Henne in to take us to the championship game. And let's let him run for it. Let's let him go. And they have been explosive ever since that loss to the Raiders, where I felt like for some reason that day they just weren't clicking and the Raiders just seemed to want it more. We were all kind of nervous after that game, but Pat Mahomes just flipped the switch like he always does and just went off for a near MVP caliber season this year.
Yeah, and I think you talked about just the faith that Andy Reid has in his roster, and I think that's huge. Just when you talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, this is a team. Obviously, they're reigning Super Bowl champs for a reason, and they came out all year I mean, how often do you see a reigning Super Bowl champ come out and post a 14-2 record where, as Craig said, they lost in week 17 when they basically sat everybody? So if they had needed to or wanted to, they really could have pushed for 15-1 as the reigning Super Bowl champ. I mean, they're so cohesive as a team now that it doesn't matter who's out there with the ball or, offensively, defensively. Everyone in that locker room trusts in the guy next to them, and it's just such a powerful thing. And that's not even taking into account all the talent across that roster, top to bottom.
Yeah, what's scary, I think, for the AFC as well is, I mean, you talk about teams after a Super Bowl going through a little bit of a hangover. I don't think you expected that with the Chiefs this year, but still, I mean, going back to the Eagles a few years ago, they've been a shell of themselves ever since then. I mean, obviously the Broncos, aren't that good anymore. So to see a team, we know when New England's won it, obviously they've just been a class of their own. But I mean, hey, we've got another team that's basically building another amazing team down in Kansas City.
Yeah, but we don't just hate them.
Right. Also that, yes.
They have a lovable coach. Let's be honest. Andy Reid's like a lovable teddy bear. I mean, you just want to sit down and eat tacos with him all day.
Yep.
And
I need burgers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was looking forward to going to the Donald Trump White House because he heard that the champions were given McDonald's, Burger King, and Taco Bell. I mean, why do you think they won the Super Bowl last year? He wanted to go for that buffet. I mean,
if you want to know why he completely changed up his coaching style after having, the Donovan McNabbs and Alex Smiths of the world, this is why. Because he was like, you know what?
He didn't want that gourmet meal that the White House was going to give him originally. He saw what Donald Trump was serving up, and he was like, yes, please, let's go all in on this. But the scary thing about this Kansas City Chiefs team is they actually have a run game now. That's not just Pat Mahomes. I mean, you add in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and that just adds a whole other dynamic to this team. And the fact that they don't have to rely solely on Pat Mahomes for either just running the ball or just kind of running clock out. I mean, this is a team that can play up-tempo or possession football, and that makes them probably the most dangerous in that they are able to run the ball consistently without having to jeopardize Pat Mahomes' health.
Yeah, exactly, and it's going to be really fun to watch them, of course, try to defend their title here in Super Bowl 55. Looking on the other side of things, you do have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 11-5, the 5th seed in the NFC. They were 2nd in the NFC South. The regular season, they started 6-2 with losses to the Saints and the Bears. They did lose 3 of 4 to start the second half of their season, which were losses to the Saints, Rams, and Chiefs. But they did finish on a 4-game winning streak, and of course, you kind of didn't know what to expect from that because it was against the Vikings, the Falcons twice, and the Lions. But then in the postseason, they showed you what they were made of. They won 31-23 over Washington in the wild card round, then defeated Drew Brees and the Saints in the divisional round 30-20, and then of course won the NFC Championship 31-26 over Green Bay. Looking at the stats, Tom Brady, he's only completing 55% of his passes. I can't talk today, but he's got 860 yards and 7 touchdowns. Chris Godwin, 14 receptions, 223 yards and a touchdown. Mike Evans has been a monster, 10 receptions for 173 yards and 2 touchdowns. The offense is 7th in yards per game, 3rd in points per game, 2nd in passing, and 28th in rushing. As far as the defense is concerned, they're 6th in yards allowed per game, 8th in points allowed per game. I didn't realize their defense was this good really until the postseason got started, but their defense has been an absolute monster. They're 21st against the pass, but what can kind of be interesting to look at going forward into this game is that they're they're first against the run. So even though we just talked about the great running backs that Kansas City has, they could be potentially taken out of the game by this great Bucs rushing defense.
My only concern that I have with Tampa Bay isn't really going to be on Tom Brady, even though just now recently it seems like he found his arm, like he misplaced it a little bit, and he's actually able to hit on some of those deep throws that Bruce Arians wants to run, which I would be concerned if you're the Chiefs defense. My main concern is how inconsistent the defense was in the middle of the season. Now, they definitely picked it up towards the end, but about halfway through the season, especially after that first Green Bay game, they just seemed like they couldn't cover a whole lot of your more explosive offenses, and they lost games that were definitely winnable because the defense just didn't seem like they wanted to pick it up. Now, if Mike Evans is 100% and then you have Chris Godwin and then if AB's back, they're going to pose problems, but I think it's going to be more of an offensive shootout than what we've seen in the last couple of Super Bowls.
But, I think Craig hinted to kind of one of the key factors in this Super Bowl matchup that you look at. And as a Packers fan who obviously was, heartbroken in that NFC title game, that Buccaneers defense is no joke. The way they've played, at least in the postseason, and especially the way they looked in Lambeau, was incredible. I mean, you have to think about the fact that Tom Brady threw 3 straight interceptions. Well, in drives, 3 straight drives ended with a Tom Brady interception, giving the ball to that explosive Green Bay offense. And on 2 of those possessions, they forced an immediate 3 and out and got the ball back to Tom Brady. So I mean, that Buccaneers defense, they got to Aaron Rodgers. I know Rodgers' line wasn't what he needed to be. It didn't have Bakhtiari, but that's no excuse for giving up the number of sacks that they gave up in that game, especially with a great quarterback like Rodgers back there who can still move around and avoid sacks and get the ball out quickly. So, that defense played lights out. They were super physical, maybe a little too physical, but they were super physical down the sidelines in the field, with their corners and everything. So that defense is absolutely no joke, and that defense is good enough it showed you this defense is good enough to win ball games when it matters.
Yeah, but is this defense good enough to really stop? Yeah, congratulations. You stopped like the 2 weapons that Green Bay has. Are you good enough to stop all the weapons that Kansas City is going to throw at you? I mean, you look at New Orleans. When New Orleans was fully healthy and they went into Tampa Bay earlier in the season, they just completely thrashed them. And that was with a quarterback who is basically immobile. So now, I mean, yes, the Tampa Bay defense is playing at a different level than they were at that point in time. But I just don't know if this Tampa Bay team in general is built to be able to go into a potential shootout with Kansas City. I mean, like I said, I just think this Kansas City team is just too well-rounded and doesn't have the question marks like Tampa Bay does.
I'm with you because I agree. If it does get to that offensive shootout, I don't think Tampa Bay can hang with them. There's no way. So the biggest factor, if Tampa is going to somehow win this, it's going to have to be on the defensive side of the ball, making big plays when it matters, and stopping Kansas City if they can. I don't know if they can. I mean, Travis Kelce alone is playing at an unbelievable level right now. It's so much fun to watch, even if you're not a Kansas City fan, to watch a guy like Travis Kelce do what he's doing. It's amazing to watch a guy like that do what he's doing.
Now, we have seen these 2 teams already square off this season. Back in Week 12, as I mentioned earlier, you had the Chiefs winning 27-24 over the Buccaneers in Tampa. The Chiefs exploded to a 17-0 lead in the first quarter. Tyreek Hill had touchdown receptions of 74 and 44 yards. Kansas City led 20-7 at halftime. Tyreek Hill's 3rd touchdown catch extended the Chiefs' lead to 27-10 before Mike Evans caught touchdowns of 31 and 7 yards in the 4th. In that game, Tyreek Hill, 13 catches, 269 yards, 3 touchdowns. Mahomes had 462 yards and 3 touchdowns. Tom Brady did play well. He was 27 for 41 with 345 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Gronk, came up big, 6 catches for 106 yards. So it wasn't really a shootout, because really at the end of the day, Tampa Bay kind of scored a couple of touchdowns in garbage time and tried to make that deficit up. But we already saw Kansas City make it a track meet earlier this season. So with that, let's go ahead and get into hot or cold. But before this, let's go ahead and get to our friends of the show. The Crash Course Podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor.fm. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device, and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. On a budget, not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Anchor, it's everything you need in a podcast in one place.
Are you tired of your same old lunch hour of sitting and scrolling through your apps on your smartphone? Have you thought about playing a board game with your coworkers? Eat Lunch and Board Game is a podcast dedicated to telling you about board games that are great for lunchtime fun and some that are probably better saved for after work hours. I've been playing games at my office for over 4 years now, where I have made new friends and business connections that have been very useful. Board games build bridges.
All right, let's go into hot or cold. If you guys are new to the podcast, basically what we do is we give basically a take on an issue, and then we say whether or not that's a hot take or a cold take. Of course, these are going to be tailor-made to our two teams, the Chiefs and the Buccaneers, and let's go ahead and start with the Kansas City Chiefs. First question is, Tyreek Hill will be Kansas City's most important weapon. For me, that's a cold take, because I feel like in this game, Tyreek Hill, I mean, he's been explosive the entire postseason. He's averaging, I think, 140 yards a game, even though he hasn't been in the end zone at all. But if there's one thing I feel like Tampa Bay, has been on Tampa Bay's list in this game, will be, hey, we can't let Tyreek Hill beat us again. So I think that's going to be a cause for them to kind of, try to take Tyreek Hill out of the game. I don't know if that'll be successful. But at the same time, I feel like that's going to be kind of the main concern of the Buccaneers defense, is to try to not let Tyreek Hill beat them again, or at least as badly as he did the first time. So I think their most important weapon is Travis Kelce, because as we'll get to later, the Chiefs have a few injuries on the line, so I think they won't necessarily have as much time to try to find Tyreek Hill, so they're going to be, trying to throw those short passes. Travis Kelce does have 8 catches for 82 yards. That was back against Tampa in Week 12. He leads the team in receptions with 105 and yards with a little over 1,400. And this postseason, he's been electric. 21 catches, 227 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So I mean, his average is 10 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown in the postseason this year. So I think that, I think that the Bucs will do all they can to try to take Tyreek Hill out of the game, and I think that opens the door for Travis Kelce.
I think this is a cold take as well, but not because I think Travis Kelce is the most important or Pat Mahomes. Honestly, I mentioned this guy earlier. I think it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, mostly because if you can get him going, he doesn't have to go off. He doesn't have to have a career day or, rush for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. It doesn't have to do that. What he needs to do is alleviate some pressure on the passing game and also help keep Tom Brady on the sideline. That's going to be the biggest key. So I think that because of that, he becomes the most important weapon in just helping open up that offense altogether.
See, I'm also going to agree. I'm going to say cold, but I'm only going to say that for like the first half, because what I think Kansas City is going to do is they're going to try and utilize Travis Kelce, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Damian Williams, Le'Veon Bell, Byron Pringle, all the other guys they have on that offense, because they're going to be focusing solely on Tyreek Hill, not letting that 90-yard deep ball beat them. And then that second half is just going to flip, because they're going to be taking all that pressure that they're applying towards everyone else on the team. And it might be 1 deep ball, maybe 2, but I think Tyreek Hill might end up making the most important play, but I don't think he's going to be overall the most important weapon.
Yeah, I'm going to stay on the cold train with you guys for a couple of reasons. One, I'm also going to agree with Crash over there. I think, again, Travis Kelce, like I said earlier, just playing at another level. But you guys are overthinking this. The Chiefs' most important weapon is their quarterback. It's Pat Mahomes. All the success that this team has, they're a great team without Mahomes, and a lot of quarterbacks, I think, can make this team go pretty far. What makes this team so special, so dangerous, what ties it all together with a pretty neat little bow is Patrick Mahomes. I know he went out in that Cleveland game, and Chad Henne came in and made enough plays to hang on and win. But I think that game also showed you why Mahomes is so important, because as great as Henne was in those little moments, he didn't. That offense was a shell of what it usually is with Mahomes. So just Mahomes is so important. He's the most important piece on that team, offense, defense, special teams, coaching staff, whatever. It all hinges on Pat Mahomes.
I'm going to be the oddball in the group. I'm going to go with hot take on this one.
Ooh, I like it.
If you think about it, the Buccaneers defense can get burnt a lot. And so I just think deep balls are going to be a threat in this game. And so who's going to catch all the deep balls? Exactly. So this one's a hot take because that defense is going to get burnt.
So now we know what Tade has his bet on.
Well, I think, too, this is Tyreek Hill is like the best wide receiver that the Buccaneers defense has faced too, in my opinion. As far as, I mean, Devontae Adams doesn't have necessarily the speed that Tyreek Hill has, and I think that's what makes him just a notch above what Devontae Adams was. So I think that'll also be kind of an interesting thing to point out as well.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, because I think Tyreek Hill, I think the best word to describe it is he's probably the most dynamic receiver that they faced. Not necessarily the best, because
I didn't mean to offend you, the Green Bay fan.
No. I mean,
he's not the best. He's the most dynamic.
Yes. Well, because Devontae Adams had 18 touchdown catches this year.
Right.
This season, he caught 18 balls in the end zone. It's insane. It was an unbelievable year. But Devontae Adams does it different ways. He does it with route running and getting separation. Tyreek Hill just beat you with speed. He'll just line up with you, wave to you, say hi, the ball snaps, and he's past you. He's a step behind you already. So I think he's the fastest, obviously, receiver that they've seen, and the most dynamic for sure.
So, question number 2, the Chiefs will run for 80-plus yards. Bring that up because, again, the Buccaneers against the run this year only allowing 81 yards a game, which is which makes them the best rush defense in the NFL. I think that's a cold take. They hit 80 yards just twice this season. Looking back, if you look through like the game logs, the running game, I mean, and rightfully so, you've got Patrick Mahomes and all those offensive weapons through the air. You don't necessarily need to run the ball, but they only have, like, their 2 great running games were great. Week 1 against the Texans and then against the Bills a few weeks later, where they were over 120 yards in those games. But other games outside of that, they go 49, 50, 60 yards. So they don't necessarily have to. They're averaging 65 yards in the playoffs, and I don't really think it matters, though, if their running game gets going, because they're 11-2 when rushing for less than 65 yards, and they rushed for less than 50 yards in 9 games this season. So the rushing attack doesn't necessarily need to get going because, if you think about a game where the rushing attack gets taken out and forces a team to be one-dimensional, Kansas City's basically been one-dimensional this season because they haven't had to be two-dimensional at all. So I think they will be under 80 yards, but I don't think that'll be a reason that they do lose if they do in fact lose.
Yeah, I think this is a cold take as well. Like I said earlier, they don't have to rush for a lot of yards. They just need to be efficient in their rushing game, whether that be running time off the clock or just opening up plays in the passing game. They have to keep that Tampa Bay defense honest. And you don't have to rush for over 100 yards, over 80 yards for it. You just need to be efficient with your rushing. And I think ultimately that's what they will be. They'll be efficient.
I'm going to have to agree with it being a cold take just because I think where Kansas City's running backs are going to get most involved is either going to be these efficient runs on first down, getting like 4 yards to set up a good like second and mid or for passing game. But I also think that they're going to be huge in pass protection because they're missing their top tackles right now. And it's going to be up to Le'Veon Bell, who's experienced in a deep ball passing game, and maybe Damian Williams, who has just shown up, to keep a little bit extra help around Patrick Mahomes, as well as send these guys out on routes and get them the ball where I think they're going to make most of their yards.
I'm going to have to disagree. I'm going to say hot take only because, again, I think you guys talked about the running backs and how we don't expect them to necessarily pop off, but as B. Scott mentioned, be efficient, and Michael had a good point. You see them a lot on first downs, just get a few yards, keep that defense honest and things. But what I think is going to happen is I think there's going to be 2 or 3 plays in this game where you're going to see Mahomes scramble, and I think once that play kind of breaks down, Mahomes has enough mobility and just enough, speed to pick up some yards on the ground. And I think 80 yards is a mark that not necessarily Mahomes himself is going to hit, but when he's going to go off, I think, he'll have a couple of rushes of 10 plus yards. I think that makes that 80-yard mark much more feasible with that happening.
Definitely have to agree with Chris on this one. I've bet on that a couple of times with Patrick Mahomes and his rushing yards. So, yeah, he can scramble pretty well, get out of the pocket, and get a couple yards.
Yeah, do we have any prop bets yet of how many yards they'll get? Do you have the inside track on that, Sade?
It's over 299 for passing for Patrick Mahomes. I know that already. I'm going for the color.
That should be easy.
I don't know much about betting, but I would take the over on that. I would take the over on 299 passing yards.
Yeah, sorry, Todd, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh no, you're good. I finished. I'm going with a hot take as well with Chris over here.
Woo!
I got you. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how the running game pans out, and I like I like thinking outside the box, Chris, because I definitely phrased the question like thinking like about the running backs, but that is a good, I think a lot of times Patrick Mahomes' ability to run kind of gets overlooked because he can extend plays with his legs, but he also can just tuck the ball and run. So I do like that aspect as well. Final question on the Chiefs: the Kansas City pass defense will shut down Brady. For me, that is a hot take. I didn't realize this. The Chiefs have played 9 games against the top 7 passing attacks. They've played the Bills twice. They've played the Chargers twice. Now, granted, once was Week 17 when it didn't matter, and they played the Raiders twice, as well as the Buccaneers once. I'm trying to think of the other teams that are up there at the top. The Saints. They played the Saints and the Falcons. So they've played, basically, you look at the top 8 teams in the league, the Chiefs have already either them or have played them. And so against in those 9 games against the top 7 passing attacks, they're 7-2. So they've gone up against some of the best passing attacks in the league and been able to either outgain them or outplay them or shut them down. So I think that will happen again in this game. They did hold Buffalo to, which is the 3rd best passing attack in the NFL, to 287 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that's the 2nd time they've done that this season. Because we mentioned going into the AFC Championship game that Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen as a combo had their worst or second worst game of the season against Kansas City back earlier in the season, and they basically replicated that against the Bills the 2nd time around. So I definitely think the Chiefs defense does have it in them to shut down Tom Brady.
I'm going to say this is a cold take. Because what's the definition of shut down Tom Brady? I mean, Tom Brady is going to get his. And not only that, but Tom Brady is a different type of player come playoffs, and especially the Super Bowl. It's really hard to bet against Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. I mean, what's his overall record in the Super Bowl? It's pretty darn good. And I think, is he going to have a career day? No. But is he going to be completely held in check and be taken completely out of the game? No. So I don't think they're going to shut down Tom Brady. But at the same time, I don't think they're going to allow Tom Brady to, look like or put up like Drew Brees-like numbers.
I'm also going to go ahead and say this is a cold take. And part of that is just because I really don't want this to be a really big defensive matchup. I know defense wins championships, but looking at the star-studded offenses of both of these teams, I just want this to be an all-out shootout. And I also don't think that the Kansas City defense can contain Mike Evans, can contain Antonio Brown if he's healthy, and contain I'm missing
Chris Godwin.
Chris Godwin. Yes, sorry, Chris Godwin. As well as their running game. Leonard Fournette has been ridiculous too to help complement that, so it's going to keep Kansas City honest. And I just think this is going to be a shootout, and I'm so happy for it. I'm ready for it. Now, do I think it's enough? I don't know, but I think this defense isn't going to be able to slow them down too much.
So I am going to agree with Craig that it's not only a hot take. I'm going to say it's a scorching hot take. I am going to say that Tom Brady does what Tom Brady does and finds a way to throw ducks up there and throw 3 interceptions. And so B. Scott said he's going to get his, and I think that's what he's going to get. He's going to throw his interceptions. He's going to leave them up there. I think Kansas City's pass defense, they've got enough playmakers out there to kind of hassle and pressure Tom Brady, who's obviously not mobile, not going to move out of the pocket. So I think the key is not necessarily keeping up with those threats that Michael mentioned, the Mike Evans and Chris Godwins of the world. I think the key is pressuring Tom Brady, forcing him to get rid of the ball quicker than he likes. That's what Green Bay was able to do a handful of times, in the NFC title game, and forced some errant throws that went incomplete, and obviously some lobs up there that got intercepted. So I think Casey's pass defense is going to kind of dial up the pressure and try to go after the 43-year-old standstill quarterback.
Yeah, following on the point Chris just made, I don't think Tom Brady's going to get that many throws into the end zone this game. Right now, the over-under for the passing yards is 295 over-under, and I feel like that's going to be an under right there. I think they're going to try to run the ball more with Kansas City on that. Leonard Fournette, try to see what he does, and Jones as well.
Well, let's go ahead and shift gears over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which, of course, we talk about Tom Brady. Of course, he gets another kind of notch in his belt, helping the Buccaneers be the first team to ever play on their home field in the Super Bowl. Of course, there's been some other teams, reading up on the game. Obviously, the 49ers played at Stanford, which is basically in their backyard. Those type of situations. But it's the first time it's ever been in their home stadium. And so the question is for the Buccaneers, home field will help the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, they won't have, a stadium packed of just Tampa Bay fans. But, this season, the Buccaneers are 5-3 at home this season. So they definitely... It's not as if it's not as if, the Seahawks are playing in Seattle for the Super Bowl or, a situation like that where it's a team or, the Patriots aren't playing in Gillette Stadium for the Super Bowl. We have a situation where the Buccaneers haven't defended home field the best this season, and the Chiefs are 8-0 on the road. So if the Buccaneers or the Chiefs are trying to look at this game like any other game, well, hey, we're the best team on the road, and the Buccaneers haven't been the best at home this season. So I think it's a cold take. I think the home field advantage, whatever advantage being in your home stadium for the Super Bowl might show, I don't think that's going to show up for the Buccaneers.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a home field advantage for the Buccaneers either. Now, the question is, who can play in bad weather? Right now, the forecast is calling for 68 and rain in Tampa Bay on Sunday. So that's going to be the big key question. But we don't really have anything to gauge in of how a team performs if they're the home team playing at their home stadium in the Super Bowl. And on top of it, this is a totally different kind of year. I mean, the only people that are going to be allowed in the stadium are family and frontline health workers that have been vaccinated. So it's kind of one of those, but
if they only let in frontline workers that are Tampa Bay fans, you never know.
Or they could be Colts fans and just absolutely hate Tom Brady and just want to see him lose. So I don't know if there's really going to be a home field advantage. I mean, it's still the Super Bowl. Of course, the festivities surrounding the Super Bowl are totally different this year as well. So it's different from that. Both quarterbacks have started in a Super Bowl. I think there's more players on the Chiefs roster, obviously, that have started in Super Bowls compared to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers roster. So really what it's going to come down to is just nerves, I think, and not really home field advantage. I mean, unless you're allowing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to sleep in their own beds at night at home, then I'll give you that, because there is something to be said about sleeping in your own bed compared to a hotel. But these are also professional athletes. They're used to sleeping in hotels all the time as well. So I don't think there's going to be a real advantage for Tampa Bay playing in Tampa Bay.
I'm going to go ahead and say hot, just because, this is something we really haven't seen before. And Tom Brady's already relaxed going into a Super Bowl. He's played in 10 of them. The man has Super Bowl pranks, for Christ's sake. But just how relaxed everyone else is around him. You got Gronk on camera wearing a sombrero during his Super Bowl interviews the other day. And I'm sure everyone else is either, if they're not sleeping at home, there's more relaxed, being in their own element, going to restaurants they know, seeing people that they know, and not having to travel and leave their family far behind. And it's just going to have this overall relaxing feel. Now, I'm having a strange feeling that most of the frontline workers are going to be from the local area, just so that way they're not having to risk flying people out. I know there were people from New York and California and all these other places heading there. So probably a couple Colts fans that just really want to see Tom Brady burn. But I just think that just how overall more relaxed the Tampa Bay team is going to feel going into their own home stadium and I'm pretty sure they got the choice to wear their white and pewters too. They chose to wear that at home, so it's gonna be an interesting element for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Michael that I think actually home field will help Tampa as much as I don't want anything to help Tampa in this game. I think it will. I think Michael made a good point that Tom Brady he lives and breathes the Super Bowl. This is his 10th one in 21 years. He goes there every other year, and he wins 2 out of 3 of them. And so, I mean, he just knows how to get it done. It doesn't matter. You could go play the Super Bowl on Mars, and Tom Brady would feel comfortable. I mean, he would find a way. But I think the most important thing for the rest of that team is just the simple fact. B. Scott made a good point that they don't have the experience across the roster. A lot of those guys haven't been to a Super Bowl before. So how great is it the first time you're there where you would be nervous? Man, you get to walk into your own stadium. You're in your own locker room. You're at your locker. Everything is the same. Your routine. Professional athletes are so routine driven that the fact that they're going to get to do exactly what they do week in and week out for a home game for the Super Bowl, and it's the first time ever, which has to just make them even that much more excited to get to do it. I mean, it's going to play some kind of advantage. I know it's not the same advantage as if it was a regular year and you could have a stadium full of Tampa Bay fans hooting and hollering and the cannons going off from the pirate ship and all those things. But just the fact that they're going to be in their same facilities has got to take the nerves down at least a couple of notches. So I think it will help them. Now, the question could be how much does it help, but I think it will help them.
I'm going to take the opposite take on this one a little bit. I think it's going to help Kansas City more that there are going to be a lot of fans in the stadium. We've seen their stadium already that they have fans there, but they're not a lot. I think the fact that the stadium will be partially filled will pump up the opposing team. It's going to pump up Kansas City, get them hyped, saying, we're coming into their house. We're going to beat them down in their house. So I think it's going to have the reverse effect. It's going to pump Kansas City up just even more.
And also, I mean, this is, Kansas City going to the Super Bowl back-to-back years in Florida. So it's not as if they're going to a complete other element. They're, not in, Louisiana or, Texas as opposed to being in Florida. I don't know if that really matters, but I mean, it's just something to note. So question number 2, Tom Brady will outperform Patrick Mahomes. I'm gonna say hot, but it's really kind of lukewarm. I'm really kind of playing devil's advocate here. Just because, looking at the numbers between these two quarterbacks, have met 4 times. Both have won twice. Mahomes in those matchups has thrown for more yards 3 of those 4 games. First 2 meetings, Mahomes had Brady beat 7 touchdowns to Brady's 2. Last 2 meetings, both have thrown for 4 touchdowns. Brady's 2 interceptions this season versus Kansas City gives him more interceptions in the all-time matchup. So Mahomes has thrown for more yards, Brady's thrown for more interceptions, but in those last couple of meetings, including the one meeting where they were on their current teams, because obviously the first 3 meetings Tom Brady was on the Patriots, they've both thrown for the equal amount of touchdowns, both been kind of, had similar numbers. So I think I'm gonna vouch for the hot take here, just because I think these two quarterbacks have been a little bit more even since their first 2 matchups a couple of years ago.
So, Tom Brady is not going to outperform Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes, yes, Tom Brady has a different level he can take it to in the playoffs. Pat Mahomes just has a different gear that he can put it in a game situation. He knows how to. Tom Brady knows how to do this as well. It's going to be a close one, but I think Pat Mahomes is going to put up the bigger numbers, mostly because of what he can do outside of the tackles and the amazing passes that he can make and the runs that he can make to keep plays alive. Those are things that Tom Brady can't do. Tom Brady knows how to manage a game well and to get his team in the right position to win, whereas Pat Mahomes can just win it.
I'm going to go ahead and say cold, but I don't think it's going to be like the massive difference that a lot of people seem to think it's going to be. I think that Tom Brady's going to show up to the Super Bowl like he normally does. But the last couple of Super Bowls he's played in, he's been real turnover prone. And especially after that Green Bay game where he threw 3 straight interceptions to end drive, well, three separate drives ending in interceptions, I think he's going to throw the game-losing turnover. It's very similar to what happened against Philadelphia. And I definitely think it's going to be really close otherwise, though.
I'm going to say it's an ice cold take. I don't think I think it's going to be as B. Scott was saying. I think Pat Mahomes and all of the weapons that he has allotted to him and all of the skills and talent that he has with himself is just going to allude to a bigger game than what 43-year-old Tom Brady can do in the this time around. I think if you're going to look at the numbers, I'm thinking Tom Brady's probably going to be somewhere 200 to 250 yards and a couple of touchdowns, where I see Mahomes like 300 plus yards and 3 touchdowns. So I think that's kind of the range that I'm looking at when you just look at the quarterback numbers. Now the interceptions, that's kind of hard to tell. Who knows what that's going to look like? As Craig said, Mahomes has been great in the playoffs, not throwing interceptions. So I don't expect him to all of a sudden start turning into a gunslinger and trying to force throws where he doesn't need to. But obviously Tampa Bay can make plays. But I just think when you look at those numbers, that's kind of the difference in range that I'm looking at. So I think that's going to be a pretty cold take. I think Mahomes will have his day.
Yeah, when you look at the Vegas odds over here, they have over-under for Patrick Mahomes at 325, Tom Brady at 295. I don't think it's really a discussion on who's going to have better production this game. It's going to be Patrick Mahomes. But I think the point of that is the Buccaneers are going to rely more on their running game than Kansas City would because they have a better running back. So I think it's just no doubt Patrick Mahomes is just going to go lights out compared to Tom Brady in stats.
Yeah, and mentioning, the interceptions, Chris mentioned, Mahomes not throwing interceptions. His 2 interceptions all time in the postseason did come in last year's Super Bowl. So, he against that great San Francisco defense last year, he did have a couple of picks. And what could potentially contribute to Mahomes not having as good of a day is the fact that the defensive line of the Buccaneers had a fantastic game against the Packers. That's question number 3. The defense will sack Mahomes 3+ times. For me, that's a hot take. I think it'll be 3. I don't see it being 5 like it was against the Packers last week, just because even though Rodgers throughout his career has been mobile, he's not as mobile as he was before. Mahomes obviously has fresher legs. The Buccaneers did have 5 sacks versus the Packers with no David Bakhtiari. The Chiefs will be missing both their left tackle, Eric Fisher, and their right tackle, Mitchell Schwartz. But it's important to note, too, that, Mahomes has only been sacked once this postseason, and the one sack happened when Fisher was still in the game. So, Fisher's replacement didn't allow a sack after, after Fisher left the game with an Achilles injury. So, you look at it, the game at that point, I think it was, pretty well in Kansas City's fortune. So, maybe there wasn't as many opportunities to sack the quarterback. Maybe they're running the ball a little bit more. But they didn't necessarily have, a ton of issues with the Bills post Eric Fisher. So I think it will be a factor not having, obviously, your starting left tackle and right tackle, but I don't think it'll be as big of a hindrance as a lot of people think. But I do still think that the Bucs defense does get to Mahomes 3 times. I think they do create a little bit of pressure. It'll just be a matter of how Mahomes deals with that pressure.
I know exactly how Mahomes is going to deal with that pressure. He's going to rush right out of it. Are they going to tackle Mahomes? Yes. Are they going to be considered sacks? No, because he's already going to be off rushing. So, no, they are not going to sack Pat Mahomes 3 times or more. It's not easy to do. Look, the Colts were able to do it last year, but that was because Pat Mahomes was gimpy. That's what it takes to be able to get to him and for it to be considered a sack. Most of the time, it's just a tackle. So no, there's not going to be 3 or more sacks. They're not going to be able to get pressure on him because by the time they even get pressure on him, he's already going to be rushing or have the ball out of his hands or extending the play.
I'm going to go ahead and give this like a lukewarm take. I think they're going to get exactly 3. And that's just going to be because Mahomes either couldn't get off that no-look pass in time or he was just barely behind the line of scrimmage while he was trying to rush. I just think that, like B. Scott was saying, it's extremely hard to take this man down because all that man does is make plays. and whether that's throwing across his body or rushing for 25 yards, they might get a couple if they jump right off the line, which, with their dominant edge rushers, I think they can get a chance in a couple of these tackles, but I don't think it'll be more than 3. I think they might get lucky to get the 3.
Yeah, I'm going to actually agree with Craig and Michael. I think I'm going to say a hot take because I think they're going to get to him 3, maybe 4 times at most. And I think there's a couple of things that are going to lend itself to that. I think the first thing is, generally speaking, young mobile quarterbacks who can elude the pocket and make plays happen sometimes have a tendency of extending the play too long and letting pressure then finally seep to them, and if coverage downfield is well enough, which I think Tampa Bay can do a good job of just kind of holding still for a few seconds, they can kind of just get one of those, coverage sacks where they just kind of eventually get to him after he's trying to extend a play and can't get it out. Or I think really the big key is that dominant defensive line. Again, I watched every play of that Packers game, and just every time Rodgers got the ball, and I've never felt like this watching a Packers game where I was fearing for Rodgers every time, because, man, they were just Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh, as much as I don't like him, like, they were absolutely bullying that Green Bay offensive line, which is a good line even without Bakhtiari. So I think those, defensive tackles are going to, kind of explode plays right at the middle, right as that ball is snapped, and force things to happen quicker than Kansas City even wants. So I think a handful of times they have good chance to get to him.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with you guys on this as well. I think that the Buccaneers will also have that ability to get to Patrick Mahomes. He might try to rush out of the pocket. He might get those yards that we also talked about earlier with his rushing ability. But I just think their defense is better than what their offensive line can hold.
Yeah, well said. So let's go ahead and get into our predictions for Super Bowl 55. Before we do that, remember you can follow us on Twitter at Crash Course FM. You can like us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, Crash Course Podcast. Obviously, these the new additions that you see here before you, they're going to be a part of the MCT podcast, which is going to be YouTube exclusive, so you won't want to miss that. So make sure you are subscribed. And then remember, you can also catch our live stream. Most of the time, it'll be on Mondays. Of course, this is a little bit different being the Super Bowl, but twitch.tv/3C Media. And of course, you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard, you can hear the Crash Course Podcast. So, without further ado, let's get our predictions for Super Bowl 55. Excuse me. We're going to tell you who's going to win the game. I'm sure, Tade is going to give all the prop bet, situation. And then we're going to obviously, get into who we think is going to take home the most valuable player. For me, my prediction for the Super Bowl, I have the Chiefs winning 34-31. No, I didn't learn anything from picking against Brady the last 2 weeks. I am going to go ahead and say that the Kansas City Chiefs win. It's kind of like I talked myself out of picking the Buccaneers because I did kind of the same thing with this last year because, growing up watching Super Bowls, you see all these great defenses, the Buccaneers defense, the Ravens defense, even the Seahawks defense, and you're like, okay, obviously when it's the better offense going up against the better defense, the defense always wins out. And that obviously wasn't the case, even in last year's Super Bowl with the Chiefs having not the best defense, over the 49ers, but just having the better offense. So I think that's going to play out here. I have the Chiefs winning 34-31. MVP, as I alluded to earlier, I think is going to be Travis Kelce. I think because of the fact you have those offensive line injuries, Mahomes is gonna have to get the ball away quick. Kelce's gonna be a good safety valve for him, and I think Kelce, who already is averaging 10 catches and 100 yards per game, is gonna have just as good of a day. So I think the Chiefs win, and I think Travis Kelce is your MVP.
All right, so I say the Chiefs are gonna win, but because Craig said the Chiefs are gonna win, you might as well go put your money on the Buccaneers because that's the way it's worked out these playoffs.
And also just forever for the Crash Kiss of Death. So, it lives on.
Pick it against him. I guess me as well. I've kind of fallen suit here as of late. But I'm going with the Chiefs as well. I'm going to go with a score of 42-31. I think the Chiefs' offense is just going to be a little bit too much for the Buccaneers to fully contain. My MVP, I'm actually going to go with Pat Mahomes as my MVP because, let's just be honest, that's the easy way out for the voters. And, I mean, if I want to get something right, I'm going to at least say that Pat Mahomes gets the MVP because, I mean, it's always the quarterback. I guess not. We've learned that this year in the Heisman. It's not always the quarterback anymore. But
See, I coming into this, I wasn't really dead set on any one. Hearing Clyde Christensen talk about how cool and how confident Tom Brady is, and going into this game, which, I mean, he always seems to be, but this is just an extra level because he's at home. And then also sitting here thinking back to last year's Super Bowl, yeah, I mean, the Buccaneers don't have a guy missing wide open targets by 15 yards to potentially win the game. But I still think it's going to come down to which weapon is going to show up. And I just don't see them stopping Tyreek Hill when it matters. You're going to see probably Patrick Mahomes roll over and just take a deep shot, 85 yards to win. I'm going to say 42-38. I think this is going to be a close game. I think it's going to come up to a touchdown, just like it did with Pittsburgh and Arizona back in 2009. I think it's going to be a close game like that and have that kind of effect.
So you all need to just mention the Tracy Porter interception just to give that dagger into Chris.
Oh, did
I? Because you mentioned.
No, I wasn't. Wait, did I say the wrong year? Because
No. I was just saying because you're right. I'm just saying because you mentioned the that's Chris's the hill he's gonna die on is that Santonio Holmes was out of the end zone.
On that hill. I will die on that hill. Santonio Holmes did not get his foot down. Look at my face. Put this face on that take. He did not get his right foot down in the end zone. It was on top of his left leg. It's an incomplete pass. I'm done, okay? The Arizona Cardinals are your rightful Super Bowl 43 champions. Put it on my tombstone, hopefully in 60 years. I don't care.
It'll be Chris Simmons, loving man. Santonio Holmes didn't get his foot down. That's what it'll say on his tombstone forever.
That's all I want.
Dude, imagine that's a good segment at some point. Like, what's the sports take you would put on your tombstone for all of eternity? And that's gonna be it for Chris.
Ooh, I like it. Yeah, I mean, I'm a Cubs, everything, like, I've gotten to see all of my teams at least win it once, and the only one I care about is the fact that Santonio Holmes did not get his damn right foot down, and it should have been incomplete pass, and the Cardinals should have been your Super Bowl 43 champions. But when you look at, our Super Bowl 55 matchup, I think I'm going to follow suit coming into this one. It really felt like going into that NFC type of game that I was confident that Green Bay's offense was going to lead them past Tampa. I think that's actually what's going to happen here in the Super Bowl. I don't think the Chiefs' offense is going to get slowed down. I'm seeing, it's Super Bowl 55. I'm thinking 55 points total. So I'm thinking it's 34-21 Kansas City. I just think Kansas City is too much offense, too many weapons, too many opportunities. Tampa Bay is not going to make enough plays to keep up. And then your MVP, I'm gonna, take that safe, easy road out there and go ahead and give it to the quarterback, give it to Pat Mahomes. If he throws for, like I expect him to throw for 300 plus and 3 touchdowns, if he hits those numbers and they win, there's going to be no reason to give it to anybody else unless a guy like Kelsey or Hill has 200 yards and 2 of those touchdowns, something astronomical like that. I think Mahomes is going to win your MVP, and then Kansas City is going to go back-to-back to win it all.
Yep, gotta follow suit here. It's going to be Kansas City that wins the game. They're currently favored by Vegas at minus 162 to Tampa's plus 143. I think the score is going to be about 35-28. Give it a little spread. I think it's going to be garbage time touchdown for the Buccaneers to get to that 28, but whatever. And then, of course, Patrick Mahomes going MVP. He's going to spread the ball around to everybody on the team. He's going to get the yardage. He's going to get the touchdowns. So there's no one else you can give it to, really, if he spreads it around.
So there you have it. We all picked the Chiefs to win Super Bowl 55. So B. Scott and I will be talking about the Buccaneers Super Bowl victory here on Monday. So make sure you lock that in. But that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast, the Super Bowl special. Thank you guys all for hanging out. And then, guys, before we leave, where can they find you on social media?
You can always find me on Twitter, Brandon_Scott87. That's where I'm at.
You can find me on Twitter at DriveTru, DR1VETRU, for some spicy memes and sports takes.
You can find me at Twitter at the very professional at Mr. Topher. That's spelled out MisterTopher92. You can find me there on Twitter always.
You can invite me to any friend groups on DraftKings, Sportsbook, or Fantasy at Toddle5, TODDLE 5. I don't have a Twitter or Facebook. What do you
Oh my gosh! Well, I mean, DraftKings, I guess, it will be where you can find Todd A. Holding his financial future in the balance. That will do it for this week's edition. Again, thank you guys for hanging out, and of course, you can catch the MCT podcast coming out next week, next Saturday. So make sure you guys are locked into that. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Crash Course Podcast. Remember, you can also follow us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. Follow on YouTube at Crash Course FM. Make sure you also tune in twitch.tv/3C Media when we record the live version of the Crash Course Podcast, which will be back on Monday. And then, of course, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Wherever podcasts can be heard, you can hear the Crash Course Podcast. We'll be back on Monday to recap the Super Bowl and kind of get into the weeds as far as the offseason is concerned. But until then, have a good one, everybody. Enjoy the Super Bowl.